It's easy to forget that Easter came in the dead of night. Before there was beautiful music and Easter egg hunts, Easter was born in a moment of great pain and darkness. And it's easy to think of Jesus hanging on the cross and then jump right to the empty tomb, to skip right over the fear and the heartbreak Jesus' friends must have felt that day, to remember only the moment where the world changed forever. And yet we know that life is so much more than fairy tales and happy endings, and that it's sometimes in these difficult places where God's love shines the brightest. And that was certainly true the first Easter morning. I would invite you to imagine with me what that Easter day must have felt like. Jesus had been killed and buried. Mary Magdalene, one of Jesus's closest friends, had gone to the tomb to prepare his body for burial, to complete his burial rites. And listen to what the Bible says. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. And so she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved. And they came, and they saw, and they went. But Mary stood weeping outside of the tomb, and she wept, and she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" And Mary replied, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around, and she saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" And supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take his body." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Teacher." And she went to tell the others, "I have seen the Lord." It's amazing to me in this moment where Mary must have felt like her whole world was crashing down, that Jesus appeared. That in this moment of complete and utter devastation, something miraculous happened. And that Mary had a front row seat to the greatest miracle of all time. Jesus, who was dead and buried, now had rose again. And it proves once and for all that God's love can't be contained, that despite all odds, God brought life out of death, and God's love will triumph. And Mary, who had come to grieve and to say goodbye to her friend, now found the whole world transformed as everything she had ever hoped for had come true right before her very eyes. But my guess is that even witnessing this miracle firsthand, that Mary didn't quite grasp the impact that those early morning hours would have, what it all meant, how the whole trajectory of humankind bent towards love in that sacred moment. And it can often be difficult to see God at work when it feels like our lives are crashing down on us. In fact, it took the early church centuries to work out what this miracle really meant, to write the creeds, to understand the impact of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection on all of us. And yet Mary intuitively must have known that something happened that day, the day where the sun dawned on the empty tomb. It's funny how the most defining moments of our lives so often happen like that. Out of chaos comes new meaning and new life, even if it takes us years to discover it. I think of marriages coming apart at the seams, or a difficult medical diagnosis. I think even of the birth of your first child, or moving off to college for the first time. And these moments where your whole world feels like it's coming apart at the seams. You're filled with pain and anxiety, uncertainty, fear, anticipation. It's in these moments, when we often think all has been lost, that we look back and realize that something new was being born in us. It's moments like these that remind me of the humble butterfly, transformed over and over and over again. What begins as this tiny little egg becomes a very hungry caterpillar who eats and eats and eats, growing and shedding its skin over and over and over again in the course of its life cycle. And then when the time is right, that little caterpillar becomes a chrysalis, apparently dead and dormant from the outside. In a process that can take weeks or months or sometimes even years, its whole body dissolves into a primordial soup, cell by cell breaking down until there is nothing recognizable left of that little caterpillar. And just when all hope seems lost, by some divine plan, order is spoken into chaos and a beautiful butterfly emerges. I remember as a child being so fascinated with butterflies, the beauty of their markings, the mystery of their transformation. And now, as an adult, I see such richness in their journey. We all have moments when it feels like our lives are just unraveling before us, that everything we've ever known or loved in the world no longer makes sense, and we feel all but dead inside. But it is these moments that make us who we are. We emerge from the other side of them a new creation, and then we discover that God is with us all the while. It's part of the mystery of life that God is at work, even if we can't see it. I can only imagine the tears that were shed when Jesus was laid dead and buried in the tomb. And yet, just 3 short days later, that despair was transformed into elation as the whole creation was made new. This is the message of Easter, that even when all seems dead and lost, that God is still working, that love triumphs in the end. That even in the darkest moment of human history, where Jesus, the embodiment of all that was good and joyful in this world, was killed for his beliefs, God's love overcomes all obstacles and brings hope once again. I know for many, this past year has been one of great trial. And it might feel a little bit like we went into the tomb last year with Jesus and then never quite made it out again. There's been moments of hopelessness and despair. Many of us have felt alone and uncertain. But even in this dark season, even now, God is making all things new. And you too, my friend, are being transformed. Maybe you felt that transformation in the depth of your soul this past year, that something new is taking root in you and that you are becoming a new creation, that something beautiful is emerging from the chaos of your lives. Maybe for the first time in a year, you're feeling safe enough to leave your house. Or maybe during your time in quarantine, you've seen your relationships blossom and deepen. Maybe you found new rhythms of life that have been joyful for you during this season. If this is you, I celebrate with you because it is so good to see God at work, the tangible fruit of this gift of love we have been offered. But maybe you find yourself today still searching, still heartbroken and lost, still waiting for hope to appear. And to you, my friend, I want to remind you that the resurrection happened in the dark hours of the night, with nobody around to witness it. None of us know exactly what happened in that empty tomb. None of us know exactly how God is at work in our world today. And yet it was Mary, not the other disciples, who had the privilege of seeing Jesus first. And she got to see Jesus because she was willing to stay in that dark moment and wait for God to appear. Mary was willing to live in the uncomfortable uncertainty that often comes in these pivotal moments of life. She remained present to what was real, what was actually happening, even when it felt unbearable to do so. I know that this is not easy, but I have found in my own life, when I am able to be attentive to those difficult places in life, that I have witnessed the most incredible transformations, and I have been gifted with that. Jesus meets us in the darkness. Sometimes it takes us a long time to recognize him. Jesus doesn't always look the way we expect him to look. And far too often, Jesus doesn't come when we expect him to come. And yet Jesus does come. He calls our name, and we hear his voice, and we recognize him in our midst. I don't know what season of life you find yourself in today. A hungry caterpillar, hopeful and new, a fragile chrysalis with your world coming apart all around you, or maybe a beautiful butterfly on the other side of a difficult transformation. But have no doubt, God is at work in our world, even now. And if we pay attention, we too will be able to say like Mary, I have seen the risen Lord.
Spirit.